Hi, friends. It's your girl Harpo. Welcome to this episode of Brown Girl Guilt titled I Attract Emotionally Unavailable Men. This episode is part of season 6 at Brown Girl Guild, and this season is titled Harpo's Love Life, a series of misfortunate events. In this season, I'm taking you all through my love life, and I know you guys love it because y'all eat this shit up. You guys love it when I share about my dates, about my situationships, about all the highs and all the lows, all the lessons that I've learned in my romantic life. And I'm happy you do because it's taken a lot of vulnerability to be able to sit down and record all these things. I mean, yes, there's a fear that the person's going to listen to it, the person's going to hear it, and then they're going to automatically know that I'm recording an episode about them. And perhaps they're listening to the episode and realizing things that I've never even told them. And yeah, I mean, all of that is there, right? It's all there. But nonetheless, I know this is important work. And so this episode, I Attract Emotionally Unavailable Men, is something that I've wanted to record for a really long time. And I just couldn't figure out the platform. I couldn't figure out the medium. I was thinking maybe I would write a blog post. Maybe I could talk about it just on Instagram stories. But then I realized I have a whole podcast that I host. Why would I not turn it into an episode? So I want to run you through my relationship with emotional unavailability and how it's showed up for me in different relationships in my life, particularly in romantic relationships. And this is a lesson that I learned really recently, actually. So, I mean, this episode, you're listening to it. It's released in November of 2022. It's a lesson that I actually learned all throughout 2022. So, it's not super fresh. I've definitely integrated it, but it's something that I'm constantly working on and something that I'm consistently working on in this moment. So, let me start off with a story. I guess the first time that I realized I was experiencing emotional unavailability within myself and with all my partners is in this story. So we were invited as a family to go to a party, and I was at home. I was in my bathroom. I was doing my makeup. I was doing my hair. I was getting ready when I got a knock on the door. I go over, open the door, and it's my dad. And my dad asks, "Where's your mom?" And I said, she's out getting ready at a salon. She's getting her hair done, her makeup done, whatever. And he made a comment. Now, it wasn't a new rude comment. It wasn't a nasty comment. It wasn't like an out of this world type of comment. Something very classic of like a brown dad to say about your mom getting ready at a salon and, she's taking too long and something about like makeup getting done or whatever, something of that sort. It wasn't a horrible comment. And yet it was enough for me to sort of just like be a little bit jarred by it and not be comfortable with it. I wasn't really okay with it. And I didn't say anything to him. I shut the door and I came back into my bathroom. And before I resumed my makeup, I stood there and I said to myself, God, don't ever let me have a partner like my dad. And then I froze. I dead ass froze when I said that. When I finished that sentence, when the metaphorical period of that sentence was placed at the end of it, I froze because I realized, but that's exactly what I've been asking the universe. That's exactly what I've been asking God. I've been asking God to send me a man like my father because I love my dad. I have, okay, I have a good relationship with my dad. He's a nice person to me. So I always say like, oh, I want a man like my dad. And yet in this moment, without even really thinking about it, I just said to the universe, please don't ever let me have a partner like my dad. And so I had to sort of like, I mean, I know I had to finish my makeup and do my hair and put a lehenga on, like go dance around at a manya, but something shifted in me that day. And I put it down in my phone's notes and I messaged my therapist the next day and I was like, I got to talk to you about something. And so in my therapy session, I was able to unpack all of that. And what happened in the time that I had this epiphany and this realization in my bathroom from when I actually scheduled that appointment and I had that therapy session was a lot of reflecting, was a lot of thinking, was a lot of feeling. Now, I had asked the universe to send me a guy like my dad because I see qualities in my dad that I admire. And, in hindsight now, I realize that those are qualities that I admire in him as a father, not necessarily as a partner to my mother. And I have been asking the universe to send me a man's like my father. And that's exactly what the universe has been doing. Like, I can't even get mad at God. I can't get mad at the universe because it's exactly what I've been asking for. And the universe is out here delivering. Like, I am meeting guys and dating guys that have the same sort of qualities and values as my dad for sure. But My father, like most brown dads, most Punjabi dads, are is emotionally unavailable. He doesn't really have language to describe his emotions, to talk about his feelings. He really bottles things up, keeps things to himself, and he's really built his personality around being this like hyper independent person with no feelings. And that's like very much the kind of guy that I attract as well. I don't really usually know what's going on in the minds and the hearts of the guys that I'm seeing, the guys that I'm dating. We don't really talk about their feelings. There's a lot of emotional unavailability. And so the kinds of partners that I'm attracting is directly related to my relationship with my father. And I think all throughout this process, I kept repeating to myself, like, I am currently confronting, like, let's say my father's emotional unavailability right now. And the reason it's such an important part of the puzzle is because often our fathers are the first male figures in our lives that we relate to, that we connect with. And, they sort of provide us and serve us with the blueprint of the way that we relate to and relate with other men. And it's not to say that I have a father that is not like he's not a good dad. He's a phenomenal dad, but in all of this I had to sort of unpack and undo also my perception of him as a father. Like, I kept telling the world and kept telling myself that he's a great father, he's this, he's that, but I had to actually sit down and ask myself if that was true, right? And again, that's not to say that he isn't, but does my checklist of parenting match his checklist of parenting? Was he the kind of father that I needed? Has he been the kind of father that I want? And to be honest, like, I'm going to be 26 soon, and in my 26 years, it's really hard for me to remember a time where I was asked by my father, "How are you?" And that's not because he doesn't care, but it's because perhaps nobody asked him how he was growing up, and his father didn't ask him how he was growing up. And so even though he doesn't have the language to directly ask that, perhaps he also doesn't understand that that's something that he should be offering his kids, right? And so there were a lot of things that I didn't necessarily get from my dad that I sort of normalized in my expectations of other men as well. And so, because I have a father that, doesn't really understand emotions and thoughts and feelings, or, at least doesn't know how to communicate them, I think that's okay in men. Like, I have, maybe not consciously, but at the core of me, that is what I have accepted. And that is what I have said to the universe that I'm okay with. And so when I'm dating guys who don't ask me how I am, don't really, care about my feelings, and, within our situationship or relationship, when it's mostly about them, I am okaying that. I am signaling to them and to the universe and to myself that that is all okay. And I was sort of unlearning all of this. Like, if you're overwhelmed listening to all of this, like, imagine what I was going through when I was sort of unlearning all of this, right? So there's so many pieces there. There's understanding that my father and my relationship with him has not necessarily been the way that I have perceived it to be. And so, that bubble has been popped, and now I have to sort of grapple with the way that I have constructed this relationship in my life, and the way that I perceive it. So I'm undoing perception. And then I'm also at the same time simultaneously um, asking myself and questioning why I want that as a partner moving forward. Like, if I have the ability to want different and to choose different, why haven't I been, right? And then third, it's like, okay, so how can I stop that now? How can I stop attracting emotionally unavailable men? The key to all of this is not changing my relationship with my father, and not necessarily, changing my relationship with the different men that I've dated, but it's really about changing myself. And it's about working on myself, and then questioning what I can do differently in how I'm approaching relationships. Now, in this time, as I was venting to my friends, I was like, "Yo, why do I keep attracting emotionally unavailable men?" I would say that, like, 90% of the time, my friends would turn around and be like, "Well, why are you attracting emotionally unavailable men? Is it because you're emotionally unavailable? Is it because you yourself are detached from your own emotions and you're not making room for your emotions? So you're attracting that as well. And, I'm a firm believer that we are mirrors for the people in our lives. Like we reflect out into the world something, and then, what we get back is a reflection of what we are projecting, right? I truly believe that we attract based on our energy, our vibration, and our frequency. And so if I was surrounded with so much emotional unavailability and I was attracting emotionally unavailable men and partners, it probably meant that there was a degree of emotional unavailability within myself as well. And so that was what I wanted to sort of explore in my therapy sessions moving forward. And, I wanted to put a pause on dating and, like seeing people and starting new relationships and friendships even until I wasn't able to fully understand my own emotional unavailability. And I feel like, for some people, when I've said this out loud to them that like, oh, I'm emotionally unavailable, they're like, but no, Harpo, you're so in tune with your emotions. Like, you're so good with your feelings. You're such a vulnerable person. Yeah, that's all true. And, I don't think that I'm emotionally unavailable in the traditional sense where I don't talk about my feelings, I bottle things up. But also kind of true. Like, I think about how anytime that I have entered into a relationship, I've always allowed the emotions and the needs and the feelings of the other person to take center stage, to be, up front and center. And I've always shrunk myself and shrunk my emotions because I didn't want to reveal to them how I was truly feeling because I feared that it would push them away. And so let's say I really liked somebody and, perhaps I was further along in how I felt about them than they did. I would always hide it. I wouldn't share it. I wouldn't actually tell this person how much they meant to me or share with them that I was really interested or that I was starting to catch feelings because I felt like it would push them away. Or if somebody had done something that was below my expectations, let's say I really wanted to go on a nice date and I kept settling for just takeout and Netflix at home, I would never address those things and I would never actually say those things out loud. And what that does is it creates a pattern of, yes, shrinking yourself and putting yourself second, but it also creates a pattern of like, you're not authentic with yourself, right? You're not honoring yourself. You're not being true to yourself. You're not being honest. And you start to live a very misaligned life because your actions are not aligned with what you truly want and what you truly feel. So I was moving through so many different relationships, friendships, platonic relationships, like work relationships, my relationship with my family and romantic partnerships. I was moving through very inauthentically. Like, I was never actually saying what I felt. And I'm somebody who is very intentional and, I consider myself a very principled being. And yet I wasn't living intentionally. I was saying that I was living intentionally, but I really wasn't. Right. And so my emotional unavailability looked like not being my true authentic self in relationships and convincing myself that I wasn't deserving enough of what I wanted. Like, if I wanted a partnership, if I wanted more commitment, if I wanted more consistency, I wanted a nice dinner date in Yaletown and not Netflix and takeout at home, I would convince myself that I wasn't deserving of those things. And when you don't think you're deserving of something, you don't have a claim to it, right? Like, you don't necessarily vocalize it because you're like, well, I'm not deserving of it, so I'm not going to actually even try and bring it into my life. I was disrespecting myself, and in being inauthentic, I was in a very weird way being emotionally unavailable, right? Because I was so afraid of showing my true self to my romantic partner, that I was hiding it and pushing it down so much. And I was really bottling up my emotions. And so, even though I'm expressive and I know how to express myself and share my feelings to speaking to a microphone and having like thousands of people listen to it, when it comes to like my intimate relationships, my intimate partnerships, it's really hard for me to vocalize what I truly want. And so what it does is it sort of starts to feed this like feedback loop of emotional unavailability. It's like, okay, well, the person's not expressing to me how they feel and what they want. Well, neither am I, right? I'm also not doing it either. And so again, you just end up attracting whatever frequency it is that you're emitting out into the world. And so now I've been working on my emotional unavailability and like really committing myself to not even saying, hey, I'm emotionally unavailable. No, I'm not. I think we have to be so stern and we have to be so careful about the language that we use. I mean, just literally to go back to what I said earlier, it's like words have so much meaning and power because I was asking the universe to send me a man's like my father, and that's exactly what I was getting, right? And so language is so powerful, language is so important. Like the universe is always listening. And so if you keep saying that you are emotionally unavailable, then that's going to be the reality, right? That's going to be the energy that you're going to emit out into the world. And so I've been really going backwards and making sure that the words that I'm using are intentional. And so I'm not even leading with the premise anymore that I am emotionally unavailable. I just say that I have some emotional unavailability that I am navigating, confronting, and working through. And to that point, like, the universe is listening so much, guys, that my dad's a Pisces, and I would say, like, oh, I want a Pisces man. It's like, I just love Pisces. And I do. I love Pisces. I think that they're such intuitive, beautiful beings. But I would always say, like, I want a man that is a Pisces. And the last guy that I dated was a freaking Pisces. So it's like, it's no surprise that the universe is bringing to you exactly what you want because you're asking for it. So, instead of like, instead of just saying what the first thing, is, instead of saying the first thing that comes to mind, why don't we be intentional about the language that we're using, right? Another thing that I'm doing in confronting my emotional unavailability is getting really clear about what I deserve. So if I wasn't voicing my concerns, my needs, my feelings, my thoughts, my opinions, because I felt like I wasn't deserving of expressing them, or I wasn't deserving of that kind of love, care, attention, and kindness that I was actually craving, then I need to get back to the roots of it, right? And so I'm working on my relationship with deservingness. It's like, what do I truly deserve? I'm pouring love back into myself so that I can build myself up and tell myself that, and not even tell myself, like, really believe at the core that I am deserving of all the things that, that my heart desires. I am deserving of all of those things. And the other thing that I'm doing is starting to respect myself and value myself. So I went on a trip recently, and it wasn't even the trip itself, but I consumed a lot of media on this trip. So I watched a bunch of like TV shows and movies, and in these movies, in these TV shows, the lead characters of all these like, films or TV shows that I was consuming, they were all such ambitious, driven people. They're leaders in their own way. And some of them were fictional characters, but some of them were based on like real life characters. And the one thing that I noticed about all these people that were lead characters in the films and in the TV shows was that they truly respected themselves, right? I was watching King Richard, and Venus and Serena Williams from a very young age. They knew they were the shit. They knew it, and they walked with that conviction. They spoke it into existence. It's the way they carried themselves. I also watched Gangubai, which is this Bollywood film on this, like, sex worker from like the 1950s who really, really valued herself and valued the work that she was doing. And so she carried herself with this sort of prestige and honor and respect that even if people around her weren't offering it to her, she was offering it to her. She really valued herself, right? And so all that I've learned in consuming this kind of media is that in order to have other people respect us and value us, we have to start to do that first. We have to value ourselves. We have to respect ourselves, because if we don't even do that, why should anybody else? So I'm getting clear. I'm getting very clear on valuing myself and respecting myself and making it a standard across my relationships. And the other thing that I'm doing is really being mindful about, who it is that I'm investing in, who it is that I'm opening myself up to. Like, I keep attracting emotionally unavailable men because I am okaying their behavior, right? I am not having high standards, or, like, I'm not really requiring them to be open people. And again, it's a direct reflection of myself. And so I'm considering that I need to be open and be in flow and be authentic, right? And to that end, like, I think authenticity is probably like authenticity is probably the biggest thing that I'm working on when it comes to my emotional unavailability. Because my therapist said something to me that blew my mind. Because, I keep like, for the most part, most of us, like, we want love, right? We want to attract our divine partner, our divine counterpart. We want to bring them in. We want to, manifest our husbands and da da da. And yet, so many of us are not prepared to do the kind of work that it takes when that person arrives. And this is something my therapist taught me. She said, "Are you confident that if that person, if your one true love, if your man's, your husband or whatever, your divine counterpart, if he shows up, are you confident enough that you would be willing to show all parts of yourself?" And I was like, wow, that is a very good question. I had never thought about that. And the answer was no. In that moment, it was no, because there were still so many parts of myself that I was carrying so much shame around, right? Like, there were still so many things that I didn't want to share with my partner, or sides of myself that I didn't want him to see, or things that I wanted to hide. And the truth is that when your person shows up, they're going to fall in love with all of you. They're not going to fall in love with a fragment of you or a part of you or one version of you and not the other. They're going to fall in love with all of you. And even if they can't even if they can't agree with all of it, they're going to, they're going to attempt to accept it and try to love it. And so she asked me, "Are you able to fully be your authentic self in front of this person?" And if the answer is no, then you need to go and work on that. You need to go back and accept yourself and love yourself and care for yourself and take all those parts of yourself that have shame deeply embedded in them and yank the shame out, right? And so that's what I've been doing. I've been yanking the shame out of all those parts of myself that I've been carrying a lot of shame. And I need to be available to myself. I need to be available for the entire version of me for someone else to be available for me. I think that's where the root of the emotional unavailability lies. It's like, if we cannot even be open and available to ourselves, yes, we can't do that to somebody else, but we cannot expect somebody else to do that for ourselves, right? We can't expect them to do that for us. And so I am doing all that I can. I'm pouring myself into the work of loving myself, of truly accepting myself and yanking the shame out. I love that, yanking the shame out. I never even thought of it like that. Wow. Come on there, but you're so smart. Anyway, how can we practice every single day arriving at our true selves? How can we arrive at our true selves every single day? How can we start to love ourselves, respect ourselves, value ourselves, and to tell ourselves that we are deserving and we are capable of all that it is that we truly want to call in? I think that is how we can start to undo the emotional unavailability that so many of us carry and so many of us in this community carry.